Welcome to Ash Ridge Cemetery, which is right behind Ash Ridge Church. And Ash Ridge Church is still used. I don't know how frequently they have services, but I looked in the window. And, you know, every time I look inside, it looks nice and clean and set up. Right now they've got, looks like they had communion or something because there's a chalice up on a table. And also they had microphones up, so they must be having services here at least periodically. I really like this cemetery a lot, not only because it's still kept up and is visible from the road and is not being ignored, but because this is, I have so much DNA in this cemetery, I don't even know how to tell you. My Prine family is very well represented here. Also the Roten family and a few others too are very well represented in this beautiful cemetery with a nice flag up top. One thing I'm going to do is, this is my great-grandfather right here, James M. Prine, M for Milburn, which for some reason is a very important name in the Prine family because I see it on some of the other headstones. Anyway, he died in the 60s, although you can't see there. He died in 1967. I unfortunately didn't get to meet him. We were alive at the same time for about 6 years, but I never got to meet him. I'm going to trim, before I leave, I'm going to trim this bush because it needs to be trimmed. This is ridiculous. This is my, I guess, step-great-grandmother. This is his second wife, Madge. Her maiden name was Morgan, which is another big name, pioneer name around here. The Morgans also came from Jacob Prickett's fort in Virginia. And they stayed married for a long time. She married before, I'm not saying she married before, I meant she predeceased him by a few years. My great-grandmother, though, James's first wife, is buried in California, in Covina, near where my sister lives. So I visit her occasionally. Anyway, I'm going to trim this bush. That's a lot better. Now you can see their names. And that bush has already bloomed this year. When I was here 2 years ago, it was summertime, and it had some really nice flowers on it. And now it's a little over 2 years later in September, so it was due for a pruning. I took a little off the top and a lot off the sides. We'll see how it looks next time I'm here. This tombstone is also very important. These are my great-great-grandparents, Nathan, Henry, and Mary Elizabeth Prine. And you know, she died, everybody called her Molly. Her maiden name was really Molly Marsh. And she died in 1915, which was a year after my great-grandparents, James and Lorena Prine, lost a son to meningitis. And so if you look on the other side of this tombstone, you see that great-grandpa James, not having married Madge yet, put his name and Aaron Sylvanus Prine on the back. It says Aaron S., his son, died in 1914. Well, just about that time, my great-grandmother took my grandfather and left him, and he didn't know where they went, and he was probably pretty bereft. And so when he buried his mother, he buried his son in the same place, obviously, and put up this monument to his son, and obviously thinking he might be buried here as well. But he is buried right nearby. That is their place. That's where he's buried over there. So, you know, he still had the plot. Here's another important stone for me. This is Sherman Siegenthaler, At the Winchester Cemetery, the tombstone for Idella Siegenthaler, well, that was his first wife. Idella was my great-great-grandmother. Sherman is my great-great-grandfather. Eddie was his second wife. And great-great-grandpa Sherman and Idella's child Lorena was my great-grandmother, and she was married to James Prine, whose tombstone I just trimmed. But anyway, it's interesting that they're both here in the same cemetery, since, there was a little fracture in the family back in the day.